everybody, and good morning. Today our speaker is Ibtihaj and she'll be giving a talk entitled Thinking Outside the Box, Empowering Ourselves. And Ibtihaj is a member of the U.S. fencing team, and she is the first Muslim woman to represent the U.S. in international competition. She graduated from Duke University and majored in International Relations and African Studies, and she is a part of the U.S. Department of State's Council to Empower Women and Girls Through Sports. Ibtihaj is a 3-time NCAA All-American, a 3-time Senior World Champion, and a 2-time National Champion. So without further ado, Ibtihaj.
Assalamualaikum. So I hope you guys are okay with me standing back here. I kind of need to prop up my notes. I do feel like a college professor right now, and I'm a bit intimidated, but we'll work through it together. Anyway, I would like to thank the MSA for inviting me to speak at this year's spring camp. I really enjoy speaking with MSAs because you all are in such a unique space in life, essentially as the future of tomorrow. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you guys today. Islam is being tested to new levels, and we face the challenge of learning how to handle living in a world that fears our beliefs while maintaining our place in society. Muslims in the West are faced with a difficult task of integrating within a larger society and being direct contributors to its growth and well-being. And when finding our roles as leaders in the community, we face the challenge of having an impact or an influence on our local community that includes Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Today I'll speak with you about my experiences as a minority athlete, delving a little bit not only into the obstacles and barriers that come with being an African-American Muslim athlete, but also how each test and each misconception has further sparked my desire to compete and represent the Ummah in a positive light, inshallah. Some of you may be wondering how, as a Muslim woman, or even as an African-American, I found the sport of fencing. And for those of you, I guess, who are unfamiliar with the sport, it's sword fighting, essentially, or modern-day sword fighting. I like to think of it as the physical chess. It's extremely tactical, and historically, it's known for being starkly white, and a sport that's reserved for the well-off, or the elite part of society. And I like to think how I wandered into a fencing gym is actually an interesting story. Early on, my parents always encouraged me and my sisters and my brother to be involved in sports. They felt that engaging in sports provided us with this unique opportunity to be not only physically fit and be active, but also a space where we could be productive, but in a halal and healthy way. I played a bunch of different sports growing up, from like softball and track and tennis. And in each of these sports, I had to like adjust the uniform in some way, whether that be wearing long sleeves or wearing long pants. And when you have to change the uniform, it changes your feeling and I guess that sense of acceptance when being part of a sports team. And all these additions that I made with these long sleeves and these long pants, they already, they come with this already adorned hijab that I was wearing. And even though, again, I was a member of the team, I never really truly felt a part of the team because even in uniform, I guess I stood out as being different. So one day, I think I was 12 years old. I was driving past a local high school with my mom, and we noticed this team practicing inside. I'm from New Jersey, Maplewood, New Jersey, and in this particular town, they have the best fencing program in the country. My parents didn't know that when they moved there, but again, we're driving past a local high school, and we noticed these people inside. They have long white pants and long white jackets, and they have these masks covering their head. And the attire of the players and what they were wearing just completely mesmerized me as a kid. My mom looked at me and she was like, I have no idea what they're doing, but when you get to high school, I want you to try it. And it was funny because fencing just kind of presented this unique opportunity for me where I felt comfortable in my values religiously, but also it engaged my desire to participate in sport. And that fall, I guess when I turned 13, I joined my high school's fencing team. And from there followed this pursuit to where I am today. I developed really quickly in the sport. I was offered a scholarship to Duke University, where alhamdulillah I was able to become a 3-time All-American. And when I graduated from Duke, I decided to pursue fencing full-time. Upon graduation, I had like this really quick decision I had to make. There had never been a minority on the United States women's saber team. And there had never been a Muslim woman on any of the United States fencing teams. And I could have entered the workforce. I could have gone to graduate school. But I believe that, I was talented and I had the ability to make the United States team. So in 2008, I made the decision, fighting, I guess, past this fear of failure that I had, to pursue fencing full-time. At that time, I had no US ranking. I think I was ranked 350th in the world. I don't know if you guys can gauge where that is, but it's really bad. I had no ranking at all. And literally, I started from the bottom. And to give you an idea of what the World Cup season consists of for, I guess, a lot of athletes competing at the elite level, we have 10 competitions that are all around the world. And we have 4 competitions within the United States, and that's just from January through June. So there is so much traveling just in a short time span. And I went from being non-existent in the fencing community to number 2 in the United States and number 11 in the world, alhamdulillah, in such a short amount of time. And it wasn't until I won, my first US title, my first national championship, that I really just believed, like, wow, I can do this. There's always that breaking point that we each have at some point in our lives where you think of something kind of far off in the distance and you're like, oh, maybe I can do that one day, but it's not until it actually happens and you actually have this amazing breakthrough that you really believe in yourself and you're like, this is something that I can do. And alhamdulillah, after 2 national championships, 2 senior world medals, and 4 national teams later, I feel like 13 years later, it's like, wow, who knew that my fencing would bring me to this point in my life? I didn't realize that when I first picked up this fencing sword, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bring me so far and bless me to accomplish so much. Again, I'm the first Muslim woman to represent the United States in international competition. And over the last 4 years, I've traveled to 15 different countries representing the United States, and all while playing, the sport that I love. And what I love about the sport of fencing is that it allows me to be competitive and allows me to be tactical. But most of all, I love that it doesn't compromise, my religion and my Islam. I have broken all these different stereotypes by excelling in sport that aren't typical to minorities, that aren't typical to Muslim women. But none of this would have been possible, without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know that Muslim women aren't, common in the sports arena, and that that may in part be because, sports require them to compromise, their modesty and dress. But in any case, I found a sport that embraces my religious beliefs and, my desire to wear hijab. And that desire brought me to this sport that honestly I've fallen in love with and I probably wouldn't have discovered otherwise. In the Muslim community, oftentimes, especially as women, we shy away from things that are outside of the Muslim norm or outside of our cultural box. I'm here to tell you that it's okay to follow a goal, a halal goal of course, that is outside of the Muslim norm. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that when you do a job, you perfect it. Never lose hope in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in store for you. And don't look to the past, but rather look to the future and what you can become. I truly believe that my hijab has brought so much attention to the sport of fencing and Muslim awareness in the United States, and alhamdulillah, it has brought it into a positive light. And I pray that my achievements provide other Muslims, provide other minorities, the courage to participate in sport and pursue their dreams. And inshallah, I sincerely pray that my achievements pave the way for Muslims that come after me. And inshallah, instilling in them that whatever they do or like to do, or that they make that a way to increase their hasanat, or their good deeds, and earn their place in Jannah, inshallah. So I guess I just want to challenge each of you to find your niche, and I hope that my story inspires you to dream big and never allow others' misconceptions of your religion, of your race, of your gender to hinder you from accomplishing your goals. My hijab again brought me to a sport that I never would have discovered otherwise, and I'm very thankful every moment of every day. I leave you with this. With every blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses upon us, we must be thankful and remember to give back in our own way. Be proactive, be proud, and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that you do. And thank you so much. I wanted to leave this kind of lecture open and maybe give you guys the opportunity to ask me some questions that you may have about what I do, or inshallah what I plan to do in the future. So, don't be afraid to be the first one. Yes?
When you made that decision about either joining the workforce or immediately taking the risk of taking up fencing, how did you decide between those and what would have been your other path to take if you hadn't chosen the workforce?
So when I graduated in the midst of the recession, so it was really difficult to find a job, number one. And remember, I'm graduating as a minority, as a hijabi, and going on these different interviews to find a job, in corporate America is very, very difficult. I thought that when I went on these interviews and I wasn't getting the job, even though I had this amazing degree, I, had really good grades. I was super confused, honestly, when I wasn't getting callbacks right away. So I thought, okay, it's probably because, maybe it's my last name. My last name is Muhammad. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take Muhammad off my resume. And I used my middle name. I used Ibtihaj on my resume, and I started getting all these calls, for jobs. And I would go on these interviews, and it's not like I wasn't a hijabi, I wasn't, African American. So it's like I got over one obstacle, but that didn't change, people's ideals or stereotypes they had in their head about African Americans or about Muslim women. So I was still, had this door kind of shut in my face every time because I was a minority. No matter what my name said, I was still a minority at the end of the day. And honestly, I can't say for sure that my hijab was the reason I wasn't, finding a job, or, my skin color was the reason, but it was very difficult for me. And I was trying to figure out, okay, I was still fencing at the time, but again, I didn't have a world ranking. And the results weren't coming in fencing either. So it was difficult for me to try to find this decision, but I knew that there weren't any minorities on the fencing team. And honestly, at that time it was 2008, it infuriated me. When you think back to all the leaps and bounds that we as minorities have accomplished in this country, it became frustrating for me that the fencing team was a space that no one had broken into yet. And I knew I was talented, but I knew that I still obviously didn't have a world ranking, I didn't have a national ranking, so it was going to be difficult to kind of fight this uphill battle, but I don't know, at that time I was like, I can't find a job, so this is what I'll do. So I just focused all my energy. I was training literally from the time I woke up in the morning till the time I went to sleep. I was eating, sleeping, breathing, fencing, and when I started to train at that kind of elite level, or that dream of competing at the elite level, is when the results just kind of came. And when I made my first team, from there I thought, okay, this is going to be easy. Now I've made the team, and now inshallah I can keep, I can keep up this level of intensity, I can continue to make teams. But I thought that's where it ended, the discrimination, that's where it ended. People's stereotypes, that's where they ended, and my teammates were gonna like be accepting of who I was, and unfortunately that, that wasn't the case. Go ahead, sorry, your question.
Yeah. I guess I have 2 quick ones.
Mm-hmm.
What was your major?
I double majored in international relations and African studies.
And then would you, and please forgive me, would you have described yourself as a little naive when you were graduating from college?
I mean, aren't we all, I guess, at 21?
But just talk about that a little bit and how that sort of your understanding of the world and understanding of how things work and how you confronted that.
Yeah. Well, I think that when you, as a Muslim, first of all, I guess I'd like to tackle that first. As a Muslim woman, I allowed these cultural norms to kind of like engulf me in a way that I thought at 21 the next step after graduating was getting married. That's what I thought in my head logically came next. And I didn't realize that even my sports would kind of be a hindrance to that. So it was, when you think about ourselves as Americans, when you graduate from high school, you go to college. When you graduate from college, you get a job. There are all these like cookie cutter kind of modules that we all follow, and even the same thing extends to us as Muslims. We all have like this idea of what comes next. And this is this internal battle that I think that we all kind of fight with ourselves at some point in our lives of, do we, make a left instead of, going right with everyone else? And it's like you kind of reach this fork in the road, and you can either take this common road that everyone takes and, be common, or you can take the road less traveled and, I don't know, be different. So, that's what yes?
Do you ever feel that you're compromising your faith for your sport?
I get that question a lot, actually, and if at any point I felt as though fencing jeopardized or compromised my Islam in any way, shape, or form, I would stop right away. Because that's not what I feel like my purpose in this life is for. And again, I mean, if at any point I felt like it did, I wouldn't. But of course you have, there are Muslims who are extremely supportive of what I do. And I think for that same number of Muslims that are supportive, there are Muslims who don't like what I do, who aren't supportive, who are very verbal about my fencing uniform and how it's not hijab, about me traveling, internationally or even domestically by myself, how I should be traveling with a mahram, and all these. I mean, I can't fight everyone, and my interpretation of this is, I feel like I not only owe it to myself, but to all the Muslims who are told every single day that they can't do something, for all the minorities who are told that no, black people don't do this, or Asian people don't do this, or hijabis don't do this, and it's like, why not? Why can't we do it? Why? Just because someone hadn't done it in the past, I don't think that it's a reason for it not to happen. And even to speak also on your question, I didn't speak about my fencing in the Muslim community for a really long time. And for those of you who know anything about my story and what I do, I feel like it kind of came to the surface recently. And I've been fencing for 13 years, so it's not, for me, it's not anything new. I've been doing it forever, but I feel like the Muslim community has kind of just caught wind of what I do. And I think a lot of it is because of maybe even the community I grew up in. I still, to this day, have never been invited to an event in my hometown to speak. It's kind of one of those things that I almost feel like a stepchild, and that my Muslim community at home doesn't acknowledge anything of what I do. And it's just because it's a very, very strict, almost borderline like Salafi community, in that I don't fit into their mold. And for a long time, and this may speak to what Abdul Mateen was saying earlier, in that that it didn't fit into what people thought I should be doing, and maybe I was a bit naive at the time, but it's just like, okay, well, all Muslims may think like this, and I just won't speak about what I do. And it wasn't until I was at a big fundraising event in New York for Masjid Taqwa. For those of you who know anything about Masjid Taqwa, it's in Brooklyn, Imam Siraj al-Hajj's masjid, and Imam Siraj al-Hajj was on stage, and he was speaking about this Muslim sister who was involved in sports and changing the world. I'm like, oh my gosh, watching to meet this sister, like, who is she, you know? And when he mentioned my name, I think my jaw hit the ground. I was completely shocked, and it was the first time where a prominent imam and a prominent, you know, someone who was really, really learned in Islam, who was really knowledgeable, had kind of gave me the stamp of approval and said what I was doing was okay. And it was just, it was like groundbreaking for me. And between Imam Siraj Wahaj and Imam Suhaib Webb, I honestly feel like I have such a strong, just like religious support in what I do, and it's allowed me to be more comfortable speaking about my experiences as a Muslim athlete. Yes?
With like, I'm sure you get media attention for your accomplishments. And I'm wondering, like, when non-Muslims identify you, do they identify you more with your cleansing side or your Muslim side?
Oh, for sure. You know, when you think about media, they're always trying to sell this story, right? And if no one knows anything about fencing, right? When it comes to profiling fencing or profiling basketball, of course they're going to profile like Kobe in basketball. Like nobody's going to talk about fencing. So what's unique about my story is that I am Muslim and that I am African American. So that's what the media tends to identify with. And even being a member of the United States team, in a sense, I feel like a veteran. Inshallah, this will be my 5th team that I've made. And I feel like I've kind of earned this spot. You know, I have this high world ranking, I work so hard, and it's so frustrating that even in this moment, my teammates still haven't accepted me. I'll never forget our World Championships last year. One of my teammates turned and looked at me and he's just like, "Where are your parents from again?" And I'm like, "What?" Like, "They're from New Jersey. Like, where are your parents from?" You know? He's like, "You're not Arab?" And I'm like, "No, dude, I'm not. Like, I was born in the United States. My parents are from the United States." And it's just kind of this sense of, like, of course I feel different as a hijabi, I feel different as a minority, but you would think that when you're on a team, your teammates are accepting of you, you know, and who you are and being different, and my teammates still haven't accepted the fact that I'm different. I mean, I can go on literally for hours, just the stories that I have. Being team dinners is totally uncomfortable for me. I'm constantly being reminded that I'm African American. I'm constantly being reminded that, you know, I'm Muslim and I wear the hijab, and it's like I'm not the spokesperson for African Americans. I'm not the spokesperson for Muslims, and I feel like if my teammates honestly had, you know, this genuine sense to get to know the religion, to get to know anything, that they would ask me in private. But when you are in a public space, like at a huge team dinner with 20 people, and someone screams across the table like, "Isn't it time for you to pray?" You know, it's kind of like they're making a mockery of who you are. So even now, I feel like I have to keep doing what I do because I want it to be easier for minorities who come after me and Muslim women to come after me, because it shouldn't be this difficult. You know, I'm an American, I was born here, my parents were born here, and that's what's so great. I like to think about the United States is that everybody's so different and we're not all the same, but for some reason we just still haven't been accepted, and we just owe it to ourselves to make our presence known.
I just wanted you to clarify, are you the first African-American woman to represent, Muslim woman to represent the United States in any sport?
I'm the first Muslim woman to represent the United States in any sport. Yeah.
So you're like Jackie Robinson of...
I don't know. Yes.
So like you mentioned like the difficulties you face like being accepted by teammates. So what is your support group like? Because I know like it would be really hard to do what you do without having something to fall back onto. Like you mentioned like Imam Siraj. And like what was your like family's reaction to this?
I was just speaking about this a little bit in terms of my family's kind of support and just acceptance of what I do. In 2008, when I made this decision to, you know, embark on this journey and be like this international athlete, my mom was the driving force behind it, and who was super supportive. When you travel this much, when you have to, you know, visit 10 countries in such a short amount of time, when you have to travel around the U.S., it is so hard financially. And I didn't know how I was going to pay for it, honestly. And my mom was the one who footed the bill. not my dad, but my mom. My dad thought I should drop everything, go to law school, that I should try to, get married, and that was his idea of what I should be doing next. And for some reason, he just didn't. I mean, my dad was at every single one of my brother's football games when we were growing up, and my brother played even collegiate football. My dad was at everything. And when I think back to my fencing, I can count on one hand how many competitions my dad has been to, and I think a lot of that just has to deal with, him being accepting of his daughter and, doing something outside of the cultural norm, outside of this Islamic norm and what I should be doing. And it's great now because when I do speak at different events, I'll see my dad go up to Imam Siraj and be like, or whoever, and be like, oh, I'm Ibtihaj Muhammad's father, And just that one moment of him saying something like that, to me is just kind of him approving in some way what I do. And you guys know, for your parents, it's when you get an A-, they ask you, why didn't you get an A? My dad is, when I go to the World Cups and say, I'll take second, my dad will say, well, I don't understand, why didn't you win? So my mom sees the blood, sweat, and tears and me practicing from literally 8 a.m. to I come home at maybe 11. She sees that. And she sees that even, if I only make a top 16, that's a step in the right direction. Whereas my dad's you didn't win, what happened? So I feel like my family is really supportive of what I do. If not, they would have kicked me out the house a long time ago. Anybody else? All right, just real quick. Okay.
Oh, I have one more, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you just describe your workout regimen, and how that, the event is one thing, but the preparation, how do you manage all that?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, because a lot of people think that sports is just that one day, of you having that game, or you having this win, or you having this loss, and that's it. But there's a lot of preparation, that goes into it, from working out and then also, I guess, to what you eat. So a typical day for me, I wake up, I don't know, I like to think pretty early for me anyway. I have to be at the gym by 8:30, and I leave the gym at about 11:15. And I have a personal trainer that I work with for the cross-training aspect of what I do. And that's a lot of plyometrics, a lot of agility drills, just to, I guess, increase your endurance, a lot of strength training. We do weights. And so from, I guess, 12 to maybe 3, I have a bit of a gap where I'm not doing anything sports related, but at 3 o'clock from New Jersey, I head into New York, and I start practice at about 4:30 or 5, and I'm practicing maybe until 9:30, 10 at night. And that's more of the fencing aspect, where I have private lessons with my coach, I have footwork, and I guess more agility drills, and then you have maybe, I'd say 2 or 3 hours of actual fencing, competitive bouts. But anyway, thank you so much, and jazakallah.